To today's webinar from Real Story Group. My name is Scott Dill. I'm on the business development team here with RSG and brought along our resident AI experts, Apoorv Durga and Scott Simmons, who will take us through the majority of today's session, one we're very excited about. As you know, there's certainly a lot of talk out there in the MarTech world about AI and agentic AI, and so we're going to put that into a little bit of reality and show how you can turn those pilots into your MarTech reality. So this is going to be a great presentation, and we're really looking forward to it. As we get started, just a couple of quick housekeeping items of note. Everyone who's on the line today will get a copy of these slides, so keep an eye out for an email from our marketing group a little bit later this week or early next week for the slides, and a recording of this presentation will be available to our subscribers, as they always are, in your subscriber library. We'll also have time at the end for questions, so if you have questions, feedback, anecdotes, challenges you want to share, feel free to enter those into the questions tab and the GoToWebinar control panel, and we'll get to those at the end of today's session. For those of you that are new to Real Story Group, we're a different kind of analyst firm. We never work for the vendors we evaluate in any way, shape, or form. As you'll hear today and in all of our other presentations, we really pull no punches when detailing what these vendors do well, but more importantly, what they don't do well and where they might fall short for you. And what we do is help you put together the pieces of the MarTech puzzle. So we really will help you to make the right choices as you're trying to optimize your MarTech stack for an omni-channel world. And as part of that, you can also gain access to your peers in the MarTech space through our MarTech Leadership Council, and we'll touch on that at the end of today's session. With that, I'm going to turn things over to Scott and Apoorv as they take us through today's session. Guys, take it away.
Thanks, Scott. So welcome. Scott mentioned this session is about turning agentic AI pilots into real governed, scalable MarTech. 4 areas that we'll hit: where AI and MarTech stands, high-value use cases, a practical pilot to production path, and how we can help. As always, we'll stay scenario focused and stack agnostic. So before logos, align your organization on the stack itself, right? So this is our standard reference model. Engagement channels rely on interaction and delivery environments, which rely on engagement services. All this is built on top of a set of foundation services. And we found that these foundation services, content, data, and decisioning, have become even more important as we move forward with agent implementations. A weak foundation just produces a weak implementation of anything built on top of it. AI sits just above the foundation, and generative AI, which gets all the press, is just one piece of the puzzle. Insights and decisioning AI are just as important in the MarTech stack. With agent AI, which I'll get to in a second, conducting kind of everything. All this is guided by responsible AI, the governance, security, and mitigation strategies that you put in place so everyone in the organization is on the same page. Agent AI plans, adapts, and takes action within workflows of a given system or across your stack with orchestration, without a human at every step. So this is where the magic is supposed to happen, right? Take a few people out of the loop and things can move faster. That autonomy is what matters because it turns a static campaign into always on, context-aware system if it's done right. Vendors cluster into closed CX suites, things like Salesforce and ServiceNow, configurable builders, composable frameworks, and RPA and agentic layers, with composition frameworks either being LLM agnostic or native. We leave the cloud CS ecosystems out of the agent development platforms as it's difficult to use them across stack. That's across the stack that's not controlled by them, right? They're kind of becoming these walled gardens. RSG has evaluated each of these vendors, and we have in-depth reports on each. We test platforms hands-on against scenarios and not marketing claims. The goal is a readiness call: invest, wait, or walk away, grounded in evidence. Predictive ready looks like clear hands-off, evidence-bound retrieval, policy budget checks, and observable runs. Common failure patterns: autonomy without context, no CRM truth, or recency rules, not approval pause or caps, and no run log. Priorities: prioritize the left column, and we'll discuss how to fix the things on the right. I'm going to hand off to Approve now to get a kind of a practical starting point with use cases. Approve.
Thank you, Scott. So those of you who know us know that we use scenarios to evaluate vendors across all our streams. So scenarios are really business use cases that serve as a way to differentiate between vendors. So for this stream, we see these 9 scenarios across 3 clusters or 3 swim lanes that work today. The first one is what we call insight acceleration. Essentially, those that pull relevant insights for marketers from approved sources quickly, right? So customer and prospect intelligence, analytics and forecasting, audience and segment optimization. The second category or the second swim lane is campaign and execution acceleration, right? So think of drafts and multiple variants, calendars that a human can approve, right? So really about personalized content activation, campaigns, orchestration, and decisioning. And the third category in the third cluster or third swim lane is about use cases related to support and process improvement, right? So triage, tagging, QA, and handoffs, right? All those support and CX use cases. Your own use cases are likely to be some hybrid combination of these. So even if they are not exactly same as yours, they can still provide a very handy basis for evaluating the vendors that you looked at in an earlier slide by Scott. So let's move to the next slide and look at some quick examples of low-hanging fruits across channels. So first one is email. So as an example, there would be to let an agent propose subject lines and a few body variants, right? So keep your approval gate, track edit distance from draft to final, and so on. So that's really quick. For web or e-commerce, think of an example where you can re-rank on-site search results using approved product data, and that approved product data or truth lives in your PIM or your catalog. For ads and acquisition, an example would be the ability to tune product feeds and create safe variants in context of your brand rules, your branding, your voice, and things like that, right? So lift there comes from hygiene and speed. Finally, content ops, things like auto tagging assets, flagging risky claims before review, all of that shortens review time and not just creation time. Now, all of these obviously depend on approved sources and human checkpoint. We could go into details of each of them, but we don't have the time today. But feel free to email us or contact us, and we can talk more about how these work and what are your typical success metrics and so on. So these are the quick wins, but let's move to the next slide and look at some of the bets that you can tune next, right? So the first one here is what we call cross-stack, next best action, and journey orchestration, right? So essentially the ability to coordinate your website, email, paid, and services And only when this obviously works only when your definition and guardrails are really solid, right? So doing cross stack orchestration. The next one is about budget pacing, right? So essentially reallocating your daily inside caps that you own. The third one is really important, suppression and rescue flows, right? So using CRM, uh, truth and recencies to stop bad sends and trigger saves. And finally, agent assisted CX triage, right? So drafting, escalating, and explaining decisions. So essentially zero out of policy actions at the gate, right? So that's really the idea. Again, feel free to reach out to us and we can talk more about, or we can explain more about each of these. So now let's look at what it takes to get from a pilot to POC, pilot or POC to production. But before we do that, let us see why pilots really fail or why pilots really break, right? Based on what we have seen with our clients, here are some reasons why pilots fail, right? So the first one is about data and meaning failure, right? So essentially this happens when an agent, let's say, acts on stale or public only facts. So it misses seasonality. For example, it gives you recommendations during Christmas which have nothing to do with Christmas, or things like that. It misses regional rules, it misses currency rules, and things like that, right? Because it has tail data or doesn't have enterprise data. The second is about governance failure, right? This happens when things like there are no caps for budget, the claims slip through, right? Essentially, there is no pause, or there is no human, or there is no human in the loop or human on the loop. The third one is about observability failure, right? So there is no run log. You cannot answer questions such as why the agent chose email over social, or why it spent the amount that it spent, right? So that's an observability failure. And finally, you have the adaptivity failure, which is essentially due to the lack of memory or feedback loop, right? So the same mistakes are repeated on every run, and the agent really doesn't learn from previous runs. So these are not edge cases. You will see them daily without proper guardrails, or if there are no proper guardrails. But there are obviously solutions to all these four types of problems. Some of the solutions we mention in the next slide, right? So there are three solutions that we have mentioned here for those four problems. These solutions are called context packet, approval gate, and run log, right? So context packet essentially fixes data and meaning, right? So this is really a small bundle that an agent must read before it acts. So some examples of what must go in a context packet are things like brand voice reference, 3 to 5 approved examples of what the voice would be like, allowed sources with IDs, regions, and currency rules, budget caps by channel, disclaimers, and things like that. The second one is approval gate and policy checks. This essentially fixes governance, right? So before, after your drafts are done, or before any calendar or publishing happens, this is where this comes into picture, right? So essentially getting humans in the loop for approving and things like that. And finally, the run log that fixes the observability and enables learning, right? So what essentially, there is an example that's on next slide. Essentially, we record each run, right? And there are several parameters. So here's an example here. There's a run ID, there's the name of the company, and there are steps and tools that are called sources with links, decision reasons, violations and reasons for those violations, who was the approver, how many tokens were used, cost for those tokens, and status, So all these kinds of things help you address the issues related to observability, and helps you learn so that the same mistakes are not repeated in future runs of the agent. Now, usually you can make it very complicated, but our recommendation is that you should always start simple. A spreadsheet is usually fine. The point is the trail and not really the underlying database. Right, so we talked about these 3 production blocks, and we'll talk more about many other production blocks in our council meet next week. But essentially, in order to be able to do all of these or create those address those production blocks, you need a plan, right? So we divide this plan into a sort of a 4-stage plan, right? So there is level 0, level 1, level 2, and level 3. We have given them names. So level 0 is really the pilot or POC. Level 1 is ship worthy. Level 2 is reliable, and level 3 is learning. Right. So essentially, then you need to develop a 30, 60, 90-day plan across all these levels. So here's one example that's mentioned on this slide. Right. So for the 30-day or level 1 plan, the idea is to be able to make your pilot ship worthy. So pick one quick win, wire the context packet that we talked about, right? So wire the context packet, the approval gate, and run log for, let's say, 1 brand and 2 channels. Also define 10 core marketing terms and link them to actual tables, columns, and joins. And that makes your pilot really ship worthy. In 60 days, the objective is to reach level 2, which is reliable, right? So here you add degraded mode and retries. So for example, if you were going to create a content calendar to a Google Sheet, but the Sheet API fails, the agent should fall back and emit a CSV or a markdown schedule, right? So that sort of reliability should be built in your POC, right? So that's what you do in your 60-day plan. And then in the 90-day plan, the idea is to make it self-learning and reinforcing all the learnings, right? So here you add your scoped memory for each brand, you track evidence coverage, you review reasons code monthly, and based on all of that, you change your prompts, your sources, your rules, and then this becomes a cycle of a sort that reinforces the learnings. So yeah, so that's really the 30, 60, 90-day plan and an example of that, right? But even to do that, there are a few important decisions that need to be taken by the leadership. We mentioned some of those reasons in the next slide, right? So the first one is act versus advice, right? So you need to decide where may the agent act on its own versus where does it only recommend something. The second thing is, the second point here, or second decision point here, is about sources. So who really owns this authoritative source list and the core definitions? The third one is about approval and logs, right? So who approves what, how long do we retain logs, who can audit them, and so on. And finally, about the budget and capacity caps, right? So who sets those caps, who sets the daily budgets or weekly or monthly budgets, what are the kill switches when spend or error rates exceed your thresholds, right? So these things are very important, and you need to be able to decide these, or your pilots will just keep on forever without ever moving into production. So based on these decisions, what should MarTech leaders do? So we've mentioned some development tactics and as well as strategic considerations here. This slide itself is very comprehensive, and we could do a full webinar on just this. So I will not go through all of these, but essentially the idea is that in terms of development, don't assume that just because it is no code, it will do all that you want, right? So don't underestimate the development effort. Budget for your token cost, audits, mandate, red team, or security reviews, right? And eventually, finally, treat no code just like Excel macros. They are really good for ad hoc tasks, but as soon as you have four tasks and there are some parallel and serial workflows and if then else statements, it is no longer a simple no code application. And then there are strategic implications of all these that are mentioned there. They are self-explanatory, so I'll not go through that. Okay, so yeah, quick note: if you are a council member, we are coming up with we have a council meeting next month where we will have a more detailed version of this all this. So we will have a full tear down and build plan for POC to production. We will do a live demo with failure injections. We will show you the consolidated limitation map along with what are the possible mitigations for those limitations. And we will also share some production artifacts that you can reuse. With that, back to you, Scott, for taking us how RSG can help with all these.
Perfect. Thanks, Apuv. Insightful as always. Last piece, how we can help you run these plays quickly. So we run short scenario first engagements, Gen AI for the content supply chain, AI use case rationalization, and agent AI readiness. What you get is a fit heat map, workflow evals, readiness checklists, a rationalization roadmap, a guardrail starter kit, and an executive readout for next steps. So you can decide, not just learn. And we can tailor any of these engagements to where you actually are in your process. When you do buy, we know how to help select technology. I think I mentioned earlier, Tony likes to say he wrote the book on it because he actually did write the book on it. It's design thinking applied to buying decisions. It's faster, it's safer. And the selections I've done in this past year have been the most successful I've done in my career. And I hate to say how long that career has been. We can also do a readiness assessment. We document today's workflows and target state changes, and then plan a path aligned to those business objectives. That alignment prevents kind of tech first detours. The work here will be based on our real score effectiveness model, and I invite everyone on the call to access the real score tool on our site and explore the AI for marketing model, as well as any of the other models that we've developed. They're all very useful. So with that, if you have any questions, please add them to the questions section on the GoToWebinar tab. And while those are getting pushed in there, I'll pass it back to Scott for a closing.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the content, guys. Really interesting presentation. And as Apoorv and Scott both mentioned, we'll be covering this during our next Stack Leadership Council meeting. So that comes up in 2 weeks on November 13th. So if you're a council member, that should already be on your calendar. If you're not a council member and would like to learn more about what that looks like, feel free to drop us a line here at explore@realstorygroup.com, and we can set up a call next week to walk through the details and hopefully get you a seat at the next council meeting. With that, I have seen a couple questions come in. Let me just take a look real quick. So one of the questions that came in from Charlie was, can we ship without giving the agent access to the CRM or warehouse?
Prove I'll hand that to you.
Yeah, I can take that. Yeah. So of course the answer depends, right? It depends on your use case. But in general, if I have to generalize, I would say that for ideation, yes. For decisions, no. Right? So if you don't have CRM or your warehouse, that means that agent is basing its decision entirely based on publicly available data, which may not be the best way to make a decision. Right? So in that case, you can do certain things, right? So if you don't have your CRM or warehouse, what you could, for example, do is that you can inject read-only KPIs via the context packet, right? So if your CRM access is missing, the agent can just use those injected KPIs and have some context, right? So there are certain ways to mitigate that, but you need some way to give agent access to some real life enterprise data.
I would say it also depends on your goal, right? If your goal is to, add something to the funnel, then you need the agent to be able to add something to the funnel, right? But if your goal is to protect your CRM, like customer data, you could theoretically just expose the customer data you want through, say, a CDP that you might have. But that's part of kind of the full thinking of the stack and how agents might play within it.
Excellent. And Kathy is asking, how do we handle when sources are down or missing?
Okay. So again, couple of things. The default behavior for an agent, if it is an AI-driven agent, is that if your sources are missing, it will just reinvent something and or hallucinate and give you some answer, right? We saw a demo recently in which I gave a name of a non-existent company and it gave me an executive report about its competitive positioning and everything, right? So it will do that. But when you are doing it in production, what you need to do is that you have to build guardrails, and an agent should simply return insufficient context if this source is not missing. So it should not be guessing, right? So that's one strategy. The second strategy is that what we call degraded mode, right? So agent could fall back on a degraded mode if a source goes missing, right? So it could produce something like an alert, like a data freshness alert or something that tells you that a source is missing and that it needs access to fresh data. Yeah, that's what I can think of right now.
Great. Okay. That's all I'm seeing on my side. You guys have any comment on yours?
Nope, we're good.
Excellent. Well, great. Thanks everyone for joining today's presentation. Certainly enjoyed the questions, and we certainly encourage you to keep your eye out for the next sessions that are coming up in November. Again, reach out to us if you have questions or would like to schedule 30 minutes with Scott, Apoorv, and the rest of our team. And with that, for Real Story Group, we appreciate your time today, and we'll see you next month. Take care.
Thanks, Scott.